That's a win.
Yeah.
The right time to hit no sound.
All right, welcome to episode 2 of Core Setting. Bill, you're making your debut. Welcome. How you doing this fine evening?
Doing really well. Excited to talk about Star Trek Picard for the first time on
Yes.
on live YouTube in any way.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, I feel like I'm a little behind the curve a little bit. I feel like I missed out last week. I was trying to tune in live, but circumstances on vacation kind of kept me from it. Um, so yeah, really eager to actually participate this week. So yeah, how
Yes.
you doing? I haven't seen you in like
Uh,
2 weeks.
yeah, I know. Bill and I haven't talked. Just a little bit of
A whole lot.
a background. I blew up his phone yesterday just about Trek because we haven't talked in a while. So this is gonna be Bill and I have not talked about the episode. Um,
No.
we haven't talked, so this is gonna be fresh and first impressions. So I'm excited to get into it. So,
Yeah,
with
I
your first impressions, Bill, what do you think of the episode? Spoilers, by the
I
way.
well, I feel kind of like naked wading into this without really talking about anything before. But like,
Do you want to do a
I,
little segment
I
on the
mean,
first episode then?
I said on Twitter I loved it,
Yeah.
and I did. I don't want to go into too much detail because that's kind of counter to I think the premise of what we're trying to do here, like lean mean, reviews of the episodes, and we might not necessarily be here like for each one, like one of us, with this. Yeah,
Hopefully next week
you'll see, you'll see.
someone else is here.
We might include somebody else,
Yeah.
possibly. So, yeah, I love the first episode. I love the premise of the show. There were things about it that really surprised me. Just in a nutshell, like quick capsule review. Uh, Spoilers, of course. If you haven't watched episode 1 or 2, you should not be watching this yet. You should
No.
watch those episodes and then come talk to us in the comments or on Twitter or live next week. Um, but no, I was really, really surprised by things like Bruce Maddox being even mentioned,
Name drop.
let
Big
alone being
name
like a
drop.
huge. That's such a unexpected the development that I didn't see coming. So, and I there were things about it that were like pretty much expected, like kind of what I expected the show to be, and there were things about it that were completely unexpected to me. So I love where the show's going. And as for this week, without going too much into a review of last week's, um, I was into it. I when I think of, keep in mind, I watched this. Dan watched it this morning,
Yep.
like a few hours ago, right? I watched it about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago. So it's a
Oh.
lot more for me. Yeah, I watched
Okay.
it when I got home from
Whoa.
work. So
Dang.
it is super, super fresh, super raw. Lots of digesting to do before I feel totally confident in my take. But
Okay.
I think of
I
there
think this
are.
is gonna be fun because I've had time to
It
process.
is.
You're just
You
coming
have.
off. You just got off the shuttlecraft. I've had time to process my trip, and yeah, it's
And this is going to be the biggest challenge for me. I am certainly guilty of having a hard time with separating the excitement of holy shit, new Star Trek,
yeah.
and like reasonable thought process and takes. So it's going to be a struggle for me to analyze so quickly.
Yeah.
But my raw instant reaction was unabashedly positive, to be honest. I thought, I think the first episode probably was a little bit crisper, like maybe a little bit more lean and mean, and I don't want to say more exciting, but like just the rawness of, oh my gosh, we're back here with this character at this point in the universe and back in the 24th, almost 25th century. Like that newness, that excitement is certainly unique to like any kind of first episode pilot. But I feel like this one moves the story along pretty well. And what I keep trying to say, and I keep kind of diverting myself, is there are scenes that really stand out to me. Like there are a couple in particular. His scene with the Stargazer Doctor is killer to me. I love it. I love that. That's a new character. I love the callback to the Stargazer. I love seeing new things from Picard's past, new relationships, people we haven't met before. That adds to his history and adds to the texture and layers of his character. Um, they're rich little Easter eggs in that dialogue that talk about things that we've talked about on the show,
Yep.
thinking that might come back into this show from TNG and All Good Things specifically. And then I also love, I think we'll probably maybe talk about this more, but the scene between him and the Admiral, where he kind of struts into Starfleet Command and says, "Yeah, I need a warp ship, I need a crew, I need a small,
Yeah.
like I need everything to go do this rogue mission of mine." And the Admiral literally
I
tells
mean,
him to go.
Admiral.
The Admiral. That Admiral literally tells Jean-Luc Picard to go
Get
F himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was jarring. That really kind of took my breath away. So like there are sequences in it that really surprised me, and I really loved a lot. They're the things that are popping into my head most strongly. But what about you? Like your general, as somebody who's talked about episode 1 and doesn't have
Okay.
same nakedness about.
I feel like this was a kind of connecting episode, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens. There's a lot of stuff that gets laid into, or like the groundwork gets laid in the first episode. So this episode, I think, is kind of like a breath. You take a breath. Like people knock Discovery. Try to follow my connection here. Discovery would just just go haphazardly through and just explain all and just say these things that don't even explain it, right? This is kind of the opposite, right? This is we got a big kind of well balanced first episode with action dialogue ratio. Now this episode, really heavy dialogue episode, but it's kind of just figuring stuff out, and so I think it's kind of hard to say it's a good episode, but it's not a bad episode. It's it's necessary for the story to keep the story moving along, right? Because I feel like I've seen some people on Twitter talking about it's kind of boring, not a lot happened, right? But I think this is a necessary episode. Bill, to touch on the scene with the doctor, I like that because I feel like I got the feeling that Picard didn't really have any friends, or didn't he make any connections on the Stargazer. I'm sure he did. We just didn't have time to, spend some time in TNG talking about that, showing that on screen when we're trying to build their character relationship on TNG. So I'm glad that they kind of brought that back. That kind of continuity makes me feel good.
Yeah, and I think that's an easy leap to make, like that, because he's so rigid and so kind of cold in the beginning of TNG. Like he's super rigid, I guess is the best word for it, in Encounter Farpoint. Like he's not somebody who seems overly concerned with developing relationships with the crew that are anything but prophetic. So it stands to reason that that must be how he was on the Stargazer and on some level. But it also stands to reason that if he served on the Stargazer, my memory fails me a little bit. I don't remember in dialogue like them saying how long he was captain of the Stargazer, but assuming it was for a number of years, maybe he did soften and become, develop relationships with at least some people on that ship, like people naturally would in a workplace.
Yeah.
And this, I agree with you though that it's kind of comforting to see a connection back from those years from I think it's another easy jump to make is to, because we saw Picard through TNG, to assume that, well, all his connections, all his friends kind of came from those years and those times on the Enterprise D. But this is a guy who lived a long life even before he got to the Enterprise D. And I like the callback to something we haven't seen before and going back even further and not taking the easy step of, well, we're just going to play with TNG people and people that we met over the course of those 7 years and 4 movies and use that as our kind of connections into Picard's past. It's okay to go deeper back and pick people that, pick people out from that we haven't met before and that we haven't been exposed to on a relationship kind of level before. I love that. I think that was a good choice.
Yeah, I'm glad they're not staying in the TNG box. There's this whole career. This is about Picard. It's not Picard's career is not just about
the next generation.
The next generation. It's a huge thing. But I get what you're saying. I can definitely rationalize it in my head. If he's rigid because this is a new command, he's this is the flagship of the Federation.
Yeah,
So he's definitely a bit more rigid, maybe. But what did you?
and he's coming off. I'm sorry, real
Yes.
quick. Like he's coming off of sort of a. If you go back to like the beginning of like the Measure of a Man, for example, where he got put through the ringer for what happened on the Stargazer. Like that wasn't an easy thing. Like that was a disaster, and people died, and he lost his ship. Like and you know he had to go through like a court martial proceeding after that.
Yeah.
So you know I think it's a natural reaction to kind of reset a little bit after something like that. Like the
Yeah.
ending on the Stargazer wasn't good. Like
No.
it wasn't a good happy experience. It was a negative thing to walk away from. So it sort of makes sense that maybe he would walk into his command on the flagship, sort of like kind of
A little bit more tight laced, a little bit, you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
trying to hit the reset button a little bit on how he's going to be, and you know I think all that kind of adds up and makes sense, a lot of sense.
Am I way off basis with the heavier dialogue in this episode, or?
Well, I think it's going to be something that we're going to see. I suspect even more than Discovery in Picard, more than in Discovery with Picard. I think this show more so than Discovery. What I'm trying to say is going to be less episodic, more difficult to like pull
Even
episodes
more than
out
Discovery,
and
which is
say,
saying something, right?
yes, I think, and as I've said many times on this show and some others too that I've had the opportunity to talk about Discovery on, I think Discovery does a pretty decent job of like being serialized, but also giving each individual episode sort of its own tact, its own vibe, its own sort of personality.
Yeah.
The Sound of Thunder with Saru on the planet is very different than going into the mycelial network to rescue Culber and Tilly and Saints of Imperfection. Like those two episodes are very distinctive and have very different feels, and they're easy to like split apart and look at them comparatively. Where I think Picard, I suspect it's going to play out a little bit more like chapters of a novel. Like each episode, I think is going to be building on each other, and it's going to be a slow build.
Right.
And I think it's going to be a challenge for people like me, and I suspect like our good friend Jim Morehouse, to like rank episodes or like differentiate and grade and do things like that.
Even just to talk about an episode, it's not really.
It's a piece of the story.
Yeah.
It's not a distinctive thing unto its own right. And like Discovery and Deep Space Nine and third season of Enterprise all have like these heavily serialized elements, but nothing like I think we're going to see here. I think this is going to be a fresh, like a step further into the serialized storytelling world than we've even seen on other versions of Star Trek that have tried to do that.
Episode is going to be the season, so you're going to have to rank seasons pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. I think so. I really think I don't think it's lost. I think it adds up too. I think when you factor in that two of the creators of the show are novelists.
Yeah.
It's Michael Chabon, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and Kirsten Byers, a Star Trek novelist. Like it makes sense that they're sort of taking that novel approach of building a story through chapters and not going super episodic. Their fingerprints are all over this show, and it's clearly designed as a long story arc. So I think what we're going to find ourselves doing, I'm guessing, for the next 8 weeks, is picking apart like what happened week to week and how it developed the ongoing story, as opposed to wow, this episode's really great because ... as opposed to last week, which is not what we're used to in Star Trek. Even with Discovery, we can always pop on and say, wow, this happened in this episode and it was different than last week. And I just don't think we're gonna see a whole lot of that here, which I'm interested in. I think this show has done a good job already, and I think they've made it very clear from the outset that this is a different kind of show. It's a more grounded show. These are not we're not looking at people who are living on a ship, in a career, in a formal, rigid career setting. This is Jean-Luc Picard years after retirement, living on Earth, surrounded by civilians, not career officers for the most part. That's a whole different thing. I think the people he's interacting with, the way people talk, the way people behave, is a very different thing. I mean, it's the difference between walking around a naval ship surrounded by people who are on duty basically on these other shows that we've experienced, and now walking around. What have we been in Boston and Marseille, France, in Picard with Dodge in Boston and Picard obviously in France and San Francisco for Starfleet headquarters. Like it's just a very different thing. I think I'm bought into the difference in the premise and the more grounded nature of the show, and with that being a whole different thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We talked about a few positives about the episode. I kind of want to bring up it's not a negative. It's just something I didn't really care for. What do you, Bill? Do you have any idea? What do you think it is? Does anything come to mind for you, or are you still overwhelmingly positive about the whole entire episode?
I mean, I don't want to say. I mean,
it's the new Tal Shiar.
The Tal Shiar, the way that the. Okay,
why are we overcomplicating an older, more secretive organization? Come on, guys. Now it's gonna be. It just overcomplicates things with explaining it, and I feel like they could have stick to Star Trek continuity if it would have been just Tal Shiar. I guess it wasn't secret enough for them, so I don't. That's my one gripe, I guess.
Sure, I want to see where it goes, and I want to see how well they develop it. But I kind of agree with that. I mean, the Tal Shiar has always been, like they kind of said. I think there's a line of dialogue in the episode where they say, when you think of the Tal Shiar, you think of like secret police. It's like the Section 31 on steroids. Like they are. You watch Face of the Enemy from TNG, where Deanna is, unwillingly undercover on a Romulan ship. Tal Shiar are scary. Like they are already like they're vicious, and they're cutthroat, and they're liars. They're conniving. You never quite know what they're up to. They'll cut the throat of their own people. Like it's serious business dealing with the Tal Shiar. Nobody wants to do it. So yeah, the groundwork is kind of already there, without necessarily needing, like you said, to maybe overcomplicate the history of the Tal Shiar and making it more expository and more thick with like plot and backstory. And that is an interesting choice that I think poses challenges. For the casual fan, the Tal Shiar is already like, what's the Tal Shiar? Like I can imagine a lot of people who aren't on Star Trek Twitter who are intrigued by Star Trek, not even knowing what the Tal Shiar really is. Let alone another historically repressed, like even more secretive version of it. It might be difficult to follow for some people.
But I mean that's the thing. But let's say, say the stars align and my wife wants to watch Star Trek Picard, and she hears Tal Shiar. It's like, okay, I can explain that, but I have this an additional layer on top of that. It's just, I don't know.
It's an interesting choice for sure, and I'm like I said, I don't want to pass judgment on it because I just did, like I said, and I'll be honest, my head was swimming. Just I want to go back and just listen to the dialogue in that kind of opening, scene. First of all, I have to kind of double back. Well, I'll continue. Okay. I want to go back and I want to listen to the dialogue between Picard and Lars. I believe her name is his Romulan female companion. Living on the vineyard, talking about the Tal Shiar and kind of and the history of the Tal Shiar and this other version of it. That's very thick with exposition and very thick with plot, and like I'm trying to follow it. And that scene is very sort of complicated. It's operating in two different timelines. Like you got stuff where he's investigating the murder site from Daj and her boyfriend, and at the same time parallel sitting in his office at the vineyard talking as well, like getting the background. So there's a lot happening there and a lot to follow. So that's a scene that I really want to go back and watch again, and that's where a lot of that stuff you're talking about is housed. So I definitely feel like I need to do that again. But I can't argue with the instinct to sort of wish it was kept maybe a little bit more simple when there is already like a simple solution to just make it the Tal Shiar. Just stick with the Tal Shiar. Yeah. And it's a strong enough premise on its own to have it be that. But the other thing I was going to say is I love his two Romulan companions. I love both of those characters. I love both of those actors. Yeah. They are like perfectly cast.
So yeah. Take this one. I love that when she drops the tea and she gets. Yes, I love that.
She's perfectly Romulan. I saw somebody this morning before I'd even watched the episode, like just with screen grabs or like stock images of the episode, comparing her to the Romulan female commander in the Enterprise incident, just like in their look and their. Alex Perry might have done that. that's a great call. Like she really does. I don't know if it's intentional. I'm sure it probably is on some level. I don't know if it's like a costume and a hair and makeup choice to kind of, bring about some features that call back to that, or if it's her choice to sort of, go to that performance as like some sort of inspiration. But it really works. I mean, that there is a real connective tissue there, and there's like a soothing, quiet, confidant nature to the male companion, I can't remember his name. I haven't nailed those down yet, but that character I find very traditionally Star Trek in a really comforting way, like quietly comforting, quietly counseling Picard in a more maybe helpful way in some ways than like in a more Deanna Troi kind of way for Picard at this point in his life.
Yeah. Some positives though. I liked. I don't like this situation, but I think bringing the doctor in and talking about his health, I think is adding an additional motivation. And
it is. Yeah.
So I think the main motivation, right? He's trying to honor his, dead friend, about and how he left Starfleet and stuff. But I think adding the health too, and you can see that that's why he's so fired up and ready to go. He's just, he doesn't want to sit.
And I think it's even more fueled by, remember, Picard remembers that future and all good things. So he knows what, in my opinion, he knows what it is. Like he knows what is coming. When the doctor's telling him it could be this, it could be that, it's some sort of syndrome. We haven't gotten it nailed down yet, but it's probably not good. Picard knows what it is and what's coming his way. So he knows time is sort of running out. And I like that. I think that does add him
because
it's one thing to
right?
He's seen it. Yeah.
Timeline, right?
He's lived it. Yeah. He's experienced it.
Yeah.
He has memories of living that life and being that sort of at times pathetic in I don't mean it meanly, but like pathetic old man who is helpless and is begging people to help him. Like he remembers that stuff from All Good Things, and I think that is an undeniable motivator. He's trying to squeeze every last bit of usefulness out of himself, and
which did you?
I like that.
Did you catch that line about I don't want to do that again? When he's talking about bringing in Worf and LaForge and all that stuff, and do that again.
He's done that before. Like, yes.
Oh man, yes, that's so cool. Even just that little bit of line, just a call back to the TNG's finale, really. On TV.
Yes.
I love that. And
just to be honest, I think just the mere mention of those names to Picard, just hearing those names, Riker, Worf, LaForge, like just hearing that and Picard like thinking about them is enough to kind of get me excited. It's really cool. It's stuff that's the kind of nerdy stuff that I never thought I'd see in life again. Just seeing Picard talk about these people. That's exciting stuff. The other thing I took away from it was the scene where he's talking to the Admiral, sort of begging to go on this mission. It sort of it kind of occurs to me, and this may have been talked about before. I'm certainly not claiming to sort of latch onto this sort of parallel first. I'm sure other people are talking about it. I've kind of intentionally been avoiding Twitter for fear of spoilers all day, and then I wanted to come on here and be as kind of untainted by other opinions as possible. But his conversation with the Admiral, sort of begging to go on this mission to go save even a chance of catching some essence of his friend in a bottle, basically, is sort of, it's an echo of the Spock. Kirk did the exact.
I was going to bring that up. This is Star Trek 3 all over again. Yes,
it is. He's fighting tooth and nail to save some piece, maybe, possibly, of a friend. And storming out of the Admiral's office, basically saying, screw them, I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Is clearly, I don't know if again, I have no idea if it's intentional, like a clear, we're doing this commitment. I'm glad that I'm not alone in noticing that, though. Sorry, I took your thunder away.
No, it's okay. As I was watching it, I was like, man, we need a leather jacket. He has to steal the ship. He has to steal the ship. So man, I that was so cool that as I was watching that, I was like, man, this is Search for Spock-esque right now, where this
Very much so.
like this
Definitely.
captain is throwing caution to the wind, literally throwing his career, his everything to the wind. Not, I mean, not everything, but and going, yeah, that was cool.
It was.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yep. The other thing too, this is kind of like a broader thing. It probably applies more that I've kind of been eager to talk about. Is I think one of my favorite things about the premise of this show is this idea that Bruce Maddox evidently has created a pair of organic androids that are built from Data's essence, right? Like they're the stuff that's kind of being triggered in Dodge in that episode, the first episode, is our instincts and knowledge from Data, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've always found the most fascinating about some of the most fascinating stuff about TNG is this question of like, Data obviously wanting to become more human, but does Data have emotions and just doesn't know how to express them? Does Data just have no point of reference and assume, like, you know what I mean? Like, what does Data feel? Can he feel like those kinds of questions? And Dodge's emotional instinct to go to Picard for protection because that's where he's safe. That's where she'll be safe. Like, I love what that says about how Data consciously or unconsciously felt about Picard.
Yeah.
That there's like that fatherly
Safety net quality.
that's what he thought of.
Yeah.
Yes, like
Yeah.
that is like huge. If they can drive that home, and there's a payoff to that idea, that makes this show like even more worthwhile for me. Like that it sort of pays off on this idea that Data does feel things, but just doesn't know how to express them. It isn't conscious of them.
Yeah.
Like they're there, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I
The way
mhm,
I get what you're saying, but the way my headcanon
mhm.
works, it's Soong was kind of the pioneer, right? But I feel like
Sure.
Maddox is using that as like building blocks, as stepping
Oh yeah.
stones to be able to, because Soong, he did implant stuff in Data like the dreams and stuff like that, but I think he was like the beta version, and now this is like the full launch, full deal thing. That
Mhm.
because these I guess synths or whatever they're called in the in Star Trek
In this
Picard,
show.
they seem like they can feel, they can cry, they can fear.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it
so
definitely seems like this is a yeah, the idea is to create
yeah,
synthetic life that appears and for all intents and purposes is human. Like it's not like Data where it's clearly a different person, a
yeah.
different kind of life form that it can blend in and you know live the same life a human being could,
But now
feel the same
but
emotions.
now you're seeing the expressions of Data through these two twins. I don't know if that
Yeah.
was intentional from Maddox or not, but I just think that's
Mhm.
kind of a cool idea, like you said.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. And I think it can. I think without being a sequel to the Next Generation, which it shouldn't be, it can pay off on things from the Next Generation in a way that's really satisfying and kind of emotional. Like to have it be about, how these characters felt about each other. You're obviously seeing how much in every moment of the show, how much Data meant to Picard.
Yeah.
That he's willing, just like how much you saw. Search for Spock makes it abundantly clear how much Spock meant to Kirk.
Yeah.
This show is telling us the same thing about Picard with Data, and it can do the other. It can go the other way too. Like it can tell us how Data felt about Picard.
Yeah.
Um, that's a worthwhile
But I mean,
endeavor.
again, it's there's nothing new right now. This is
Mhm.
what they do. This is they add context to the greater Star Trek
Yes.
universe, which is
Mhm.
all in day's work
Which
with
we
this
like.
with this newfound production team.
Agreed.
Let's see what else.
What did you like the teaser, like the opening with
Oh, I got
the
another thing that I want to say, but yeah, go ahead.
no, how did you feel about the opening of the episode with the sort of flashback to what happened on Utopia Planitia from the perspective of people who were actually there with the synthetics?
Eerie. It was
Eerie.
really,
Scary,
really eerie.
right?
It was scary. It was like
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of like if I want to go on another show about top 5 horror episodes, like that you
Hmm.
know, however long that 3 to 5 minutes was really scary to
Hmm.
me. But yeah, that was cool to see. It just clicked that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was
Um,
like, yeah, I think they say it was like 18 years. Well, I don't know that they say it. They
so the
put the
short
year.
trek was 18 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know
so
about
that
18. It
just
might be more like 13 or something.
yeah
I gotta look at it again.
that
But
just
it's
clicked
at least a decade ago.
with
Yeah.
that. But yeah, it's it. But I also felt kind of bad for them and uh
Sure. Yeah.
how they treated them.
Hmm.
I feel like it goes back to like Voyager and stuff with, and even TNG
Doctor. Yeah.
with you know how the people and crew members treated Data. So it's definitely a callback, I think. But yeah, it was really eerie.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
What else
Also,
were you gonna say?
a
Yeah, another
shout out
thought.
to the location director bringing in Vasquez Rock.
Oh yeah.
Oh, a classic Star Trek that they used 18 different times in all the shows. Oh, it was so cool to see that rock formation and then just be like, yes, even the smallest
And
little
like,
thing like that just makes feel good inside.
does 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 that character live on the real Vasquez Rocks? Because time you see Vasquez Rocks, this is seemingly the Vasquez Rocks on Earth. Maybe is it? I don't know. Are they on Earth?
I think they're on
It takes a
Earth.
shuttle, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's a taxi shuttle.
yeah. I
So
think it's on Earth somewhere.
I think so too.
Um, but I
But
love
yeah,
that
I
set
love
too.
that
The
too.
trailer in the trailer, it's like a
Yeah,
trailer.
really cool.
It's funny to think about if there was trailers still like that, like modular homes in the future, and there still is. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Says a lot about her. Like you're introducing that character
Yeah,
with a lot of personality, kind of just in
hmm
the production design and
and
uh, yeah,
I think they already have that kind of rapport back and forth. We kind of talked about it
yeah,
a couple weeks with just yeah, it's gonna be great. I think that's gonna be a great rapport.
agreed.
Find something who hates you and has nothing to lose. Well, this seems like a perfect
Already
character.
called.
Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think it's going to be hard these episodes as individual pieces. I suspect. I'm kind of torn on. I think I prefer probably the premiere Remembrance, but
Yeah.
just that like there's so much more kind of being introduced and happening there. Well, let me ask you this: like, what do you think of? There's not a lot of questions answered here. There's more questions than answered, but what's going on that board cube with Sonia, the twin,
To
and
me, that does not seem like the Romulan style to make a museum or an archaeological dig. I feel
Mhm.
like they're.
No, that's a facade.
That's just. I know that.
That's totally.
Yeah, I think we've. Yeah, I don't buy it at all. At all. Um, I don't. Why is there other species there, or is it just?
That's the thing. It's hard. We still haven't kind of caught our breath. I think in jumping ahead these years and post like Romulan disaster. What is the Romulan place in the universe? Like the Romulans are so much more integrated than we were ever used to seeing. Like they're in our space and
But
they're like sharing.
yeah,
Uh, like they're like you said they're operating this they're calling it a museum. I suspect, like I said, that there's other stuff going on, and
yes,
that's a way to kind of
yeah.
skirt by, whatever. But I yeah, I'm still trying to figure out like you said, what's their place in the universe and how like what's their relationship with other species? Because there's obviously a lot of resentment there, probably going both ways. The Federation kind of pulled out from the Armada rescue effort,
Yeah,
leaving the Romulans kind of hanging out to dry because there's they're the bad guys for so long. We can't waste our resources on helping them. They're on their own.
yeah.
There's got to be resentment going both ways there. But they also seem to be much more integrated than they ever have been. Working side by side with humans and
Because
yeah, I
it's weird because I just picture them or have pictured them as such a closed off, very territorial species, and
Yeah.
now it's like this is like a
Well, they have no territory now
yeah
for the most part. I mean, that's the thing. Like I think one of the things that I suspect they're going to play with in the show is exploring that. I hope they do. Like, what are the Romulans doing? This is, like you said, their whole definition, like who they are, is secretive, territorial, protective of their own. You know, very closed off. But now, when you take away their territory, then what are they? Like when you take away what they're so protective of, Romulus and Remus, like the two worlds that are
yeah
on the Falcon protecting the two planets. Take that away, like what's left? Like what are the Romulans? What's their identity?
yeah.
And I think what we're seeing is that there really isn't one. Yeah, you're seeing Romulans that are kind of like wandering the galaxy, and some are working with the Federation, and then a more. And I think that's kind of good. Like I think anything, nobody, it shouldn't be, one size fits all. Like not all Romulans are the same. Every Romulan is different. There are Romulans who embraced, I'm sure, the coming together with the Federation in some kind of way because it's necessary, and they're living on the vineyard with Picard. And then you have Romulans like Narek, who is clearly involved in this Tal Shiar-esque
Was she the
entity.
Commodore?
The Commodore, who I'm not
wait,
sure.
no, okay,
One of the things.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
The Narek is the bad. Yeah, the guy who's sleeping with Daj's sister.
Yeah.
He's obviously up to no good somehow. But the Romulans seem to be working with Starfleet security somehow.
Yeah, but they
not yeah.
What's the word for a bad Commodore? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't trust her at all. I don't trust her lieutenant.
No.
Yeah, but I don't trust the guy sleeping with Daj's sister either. So it's like that.
No.
But I guess that might be my. This is how I view Romulans. I guess as untrustworthy and conniving, scheming.
I think it seems to me that they know who she is, and that they're trying to, because they were upset. The Commodore is upset that they lost Daj, like the Daj killed. So obviously, they're trying to get their hands on her and to learn about her.
But this
to get information without triggering some sort of they don't want to trigger her the way Daj was triggered.
Yeah,
is what I'm gathering. They're trying to gather information without triggering.
But I got the kind of. I feel like Picard was just kind of thrown into this mission. Like this was an ongoing mission that they've been working on, and then it spiraled out of control. I'm just curious what kind of information they're trying to get out of her. If they're trying to figure out the location of Maddox, or I don't know, because
how many people are there? Like,
it was kind of confusing because the people staying with Picard are saying that the Romulans aren't really interested in any type of artificial life form at all.
Yeah, right.
But then on the other side, they've got this more secretive Tal Shiar working on studying, this artificial life. So
hybrid. Yeah, I think it's intentional. Mysterious. I think there are a lot of layers that haven't been unpacked yet. And I think there were a lot. If you go back and just if you listen to us talk about Discovery, even as it was happening, there were always a lot of questions. How many weeks did we talk about this? Is this the Borg or the Borg? Is this like some Borg origin story? And it wasn't.
No.
Like there's always a lot of that's the nature of these kinds of stories, like the serialized, slow reveal kind of approach that they're certainly taking with this show, and even to some degree Discovery was too. It's inviting these kinds of speculations, and they're intentionally withholding information. To stretch it out over the 10 weeks. So there's going to be more revealed. There's going to be more backstory. I think there's going to be more context for what the Romulans are up to and what their place in the universe is. That they're, we'll learn more about this Commodore and this Romulan agent who's a lieutenant. Who I think they talk. Narek has a line about the Romulans' ears being like rounded, unpointed, obviously rounded ears. So who knows that she's a Romulan? Does the Commodore know? There are all kinds of questions. I assume she does. Is the Romulan is the Commodore an Admiral or Vulcan? I thought she was acting maybe a little bit more Vulcan, a little bit more rigid than the other Romulans.
I thought she was Vulcan because she had she had the symbol on her desk.
Oh yeah, you're
The
right.
circle and then
You're
the
right.
triangle. But
You're right. You're right.
I don't know.
She's
But
in
Vulcans
league. I
don't
mean,
lie.
she's
I don't know what's going on here.
mm, they lie until they don't lie until they need to lie. Enterprise, uh, and other there are other examples of Vulcans not necessarily being the most upstanding citizens at times,
I'm just
including
coming from
Starfleet
TOS where
Vulcans.
that's what.
Well, that's always been the problem for
Yeah.
people with Enterprise, especially people come away from TOS thinking, that Spock like Spock's character and his traits is what all Vulcans are. Which even in like a mock time, yeah, like even in a mock time, I think Spock's like betrothed wife is super manipulative and is doing things that are not nice at all. she's not interested in anything but herself. So there are a lot. I think Vulcans are as imperfect as anybody. They're just more logical about it. Yeah, more cold and conniving maybe than anybody else. But there's a lot of questions left to be answered. I think I'm curious to see like what are they doing with the Borg. I think silly, like not silly, but lines like, oh, these Borg are disconnected from the hive. Like this is a graveyard. The Borg aren't worried about this ship. I think we'll see how long that lasts. I think playing with Borg always ends badly.
Yeah. Playing with fire.
I suspect.
Then you get assimilated.
Yeah. I think one of the things that has sort of been like a hanging Chad kind of question for a lot of people was like Endgame, which you love so much and have such a positive history with. Sort of open question, like, what does Janeway do to the Borg? Like, what is that ending? Like, are the Borg irreparably damaged at the end of that? Like, we don't really know because it's the last we see of them.
Yeah.
But this seems to imply that the Borg are kind of fine. Like, this is just a disconnected cube, and the collective is out there, and they're just not connected. So this seems to imply that the Borg are alive and well, and maybe as threatening as ever. But we'll see. I suspect we'll find out.
Yeah, I'll have to. Yeah, I don't know.
It felt like foreshadowing to me, laying on these drones are disconnected and the least of the collective's worries.
Yeah.
And Borg were scary to me, like the wounds, like when they lifted the piece off that guy.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel bad asking this because I know we talked about it. I don't worth a great deal of conversation. What did you think of the F-bomb? Did it bother you? Or didn't bother me. I thought it was actually really effective. I think that made that scene that was like an exclamation point on that scene. Like hearing, like I said, somebody tell Picard to
F off.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's.
It didn't take me out of the moment at all.
No, I think it set me back. I mean,
which I feel like it was kind of supposed to, right?
Yeah.
Like
take the wind out of you.
Yeah, which that's kind of what
they said that was. To him?
Yeah, because they're trying to take the wind out of his sails, and what better way to kind of dress him down with the WTF moment, you know?
Right. Exactly. I had no problem with it.
Yes.
But I suspect some people will want to talk about that.
Yeah.
So we're on the record.
I don't mind it.
Really bother us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts?
Other last thoughts? Yeah, we're kind of winding down here. Before I forget, I kind of want to touch on a comment from Ian on last week's episode. I know Ian's going to be watching this after the fact because he is across the pond, so the episode doesn't get released until later. He talked about Thad's tree being up, Christmas tree being up. I just want to support Thad in saying that my tree's still up. So Thad, let's just stick together in our procrastinating duties, or procrastinating our duties to take down our trees. So
there's nothing wrong with
that. Yeah. But shout out to Ian.
I appreciate the boldness. So, cool. Yes, shout out to Ian.
Yes. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think for now, I think we covered
a good bit.
Certainly, I talked about what was on my mind after a Raw 2 hours ago watch.
Yeah.
But we'll be covering more, I'm sure. Like as the season ends, we'll be doubling back, not to do like episode recaps, but I think this whole thing is going to need to be like sort of reanalyzed as a whole, and elements from all these episodes are going to come back to pay off in future episodes. So we'll be talking about things that were said or happened in this episode down the road again, I'm sure.
Yes. We should be back next week covering another episode of Star Trek Picard, so definitely stay tuned for that. Stay tuned also because I want to get the maybe a live commentary scheduled with Thad too, because he, as you guys saw last week, he stays up until it's released really early or late, depending on what side of the country you're on. So yeah, that should be fun. Maybe in a couple of weeks we should do that.
Okay.
With some copious amounts of coffee and
perhaps, yeah.
Something. I don't know. Otherwise, that's been it. You guys know the drill. The discussion doesn't have to stop here. Stealing my outro from Trek Live. Come over to Facebook. Twitter is a great way to keep the conversation going, and the Discord server. We've got great conversation on the Discord server pretty much every week now, I think. Which
it's been pretty good lately.
Which is really
There's
cool.
a good number of people in there.
Yeah.
And if you're interested at all, if you're watching this and you are a Discord user, or maybe you're not even a Discord user yet, if you're curious about it, DM me at TrekFan4387 or Dan at Trek Live, and we'll get you in there. It's easy to download the app and to get an invite into our server. And you can get the conversation on there, talking about the episodes as they air and all kinds of stuff, Star Trek related, as we move forward.
Yep. All right, everyone. This has been this week's Course Heading. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.